President Obama has called out Congress for not staying on the job and getting a debt ceiling deal well in advance of the presumed August deadline. He even compared the Republicans to children, saying his own kids get their homework done well ahead of time. Idaho Senator Mike Crapo is one of 5 senators from both parties who've been working hard on a compromise. Senator, thanks so much for joining us today. So how did you feel being compared to a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old?
Well, frankly, I was frustrated because I think, as you know, Andrea, I served on the President's Fiscal Commission. We put out a work product in December of last year, and the President has yet to even say whether he would support any of our work product. Until last week, he didn't even himself engage. And for him to now call on Congress, by the way, the Senate, which is run by his own party and is really doing nothing these days to get engaged, is, I think, a little bit of unnecessary name-calling. It's true, we need to get engaged, we need to get a deal, and we need to work aggressively to solve America's fiscal crisis, but the partisanship and the name-calling, in my opinion, is not productive.
Well, in fact, I was interviewing one of your colleagues from the Deficit Commission, Alan Simpson, earlier in the show, and he was also frustrated that he hadn't heard right away when you guys came out with your recommendations that there was silence, really, from the White House, from the president who had appointed you. But now, what can be salvaged? One of the points also that Alan Simpson made was that Grover Norquist seems to be running the country by having all of the Republicans sign this no tax pledge, which really cuts off 1/3, one leg of the 3-legged stool for any kind of agreement: entitlements, defense, and taxes.
Well, first of all, I know a lot of attention is being given to Grover Norquist, but the issue of taxes is one on which Republicans have been solid for years and years. The real problem in Washington is not that taxes are too low, it is that spending is too high. And in fact, last December, when we really engaged in the question as to whether the tax relief that was in place should be extended or allowed to expire and let taxes go up, both parties, and frankly the White House and the President's own economic team, pointed out that raising taxes right now is the wrong thing to do for our economy.
But Senator, excuse me, what about closing loopholes? What about getting rid of some of the tax breaks for the wealthy, the corporate jets and all the rest? What would be wrong with that?
Well, first of all, that's always just code for much broader, large tax increases that slam small businesses, and the President singling out, expensive airplanes is not the focus of the issue we're debating here. But secondly, the way that we should deal with the revenue piece of the equation is not to engage in the traditional whether we raise taxes or lower taxes argument. It is that we need to reform our tax code. You couldn't get a tax code that was much more anti-competitive, complex, and expensive to comply with than our tax code. And I'm ready to look at those issues you described if we can do it in the context of reforming our code, broadening the base, stimulating our economy, making a dynamic growth in our revenue, and using that dynamic growth in the economy to spur our ability to deal with our debt crisis.
And briefly, well, I see a little window there, a little running room there. And briefly, what do you think of Harry Reid calling you all back? Does that mean you have to cancel some vacation plans next week?
Well, a lot of people call it vacation. It was really a work period out in the States. But I agree that we should stay here in Washington and be engaged. I mean, we face a crisis that is as big as America has ever faced. And I think Americans are increasingly becoming aware of that. And the deadline, at least for the current part of that battle, which is the debt ceiling battle, is looming. I think it's entirely appropriate that Congress stay here and work hard. And by the way, I'm glad the President is now finally engaged, and I hope he works hard and aggressively with us.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Senator.